Mario, as well as his many friends and enemies, have had their fair share of design changes over the years, some very subtle like Wario going from long-sleeve t-shirts to short-sleeve t-shirts in Wario Land 2, but not becoming permanent until around the mid-2000s when Super Mario 64 DS released. For whatever reason, Nintendo just could not commit to a decision within pre-2004, as short sleeves in Wario World, back to long in Mario Power Tennis. Or Waluigi now cuffing his jeans in Mario Kart World. Now, this is something only I would fixate on as someone who cuffs their trousers too. Then there's the characters who went through much more drastic changes over the years. Bowser's a big one. Comparing how he looked in official art for the first Super Mario Bros. To modern day art, it's like two completely different guys. Only aspects that really stayed the same were the orange hair and the overall spiky mutant turtle aesthetic. But whenever artists are in the process of creating a character, there's a chance they'll create early concept art for the character in question, which, as the name implies, is done to help convey early ideas for how said character will look or act in the piece of media they're being created for. That doesn't mean every idea that was used in the concept stages was automatically intended to be in the final product either. Sometimes the artist will just mess around with their own unique ideas during the concept stages. Concept art has always been a very fascinating subject to me, as it allows us to see these characters in ways we never would have thought possible depending on the circumstances. So I wanted to take this video to go over different concept arts for various Mario characters. Unfortunately, not every single Mario character is going to be on here because a lot of these guys don't even have public concept art to begin with, regardless of how popular they are. The big heads in Nintendo can be pretty stingy with that kind of thing. So just keep that in mind as you're watching along. As usual, don't forget to like and subscribe, helps out a ton. Anyways, let's talk art. Most of the big man himself's concept art during his early stages were pretty straightforward. Rather than getting concept art for what eventually was used in the promotional material for the Donkey Kong arcade game, the concept art we do have is various angles of the 8-bit version of Mario that was used in the actual game, just sketched, not colored. These shots consist of Mario sideways walking, climbing the ladders, and the last little bit to get himself standing again at the end of a ladder climb. Also, what appears to be sort of an unfinished sketch of Mario due to the head only being a circle and not proper limbs attached. There's also this image of Mario from a Donkey Kong coloring book where he was still classified as a carpenter, where he's much lankier and bald. I don't know about you guys, but if he stayed bald, not sure if I would have been a fan. Super Mario Bros. 1 followed a similar suit, where a lot of the concept art we got was in Mario's 8-bit form. This first piece shows Mario at an angle in between facing forwards and sideways that I don't believe is present anywhere in the final game. To me, it looks like he either has his arms folded or he's doing a thinking pose. These shots appear like they're meant to be Mario's death poses based on his shocked expression and arms up in the air. What's interesting is these death models look like they're in his Super Mushroom big form rather than his little self. Also, a common trait with this art is Mario's hair, sleeves, and shoes were all shaded dark blue as opposed to a lighter brown in the final game. Another concept sheet showing similar poses to the previous, only more of the sketches are black and white with a couple of them being smoothed out on the edges as opposed to pointed due to the 8-bit style. But the biggest thing that stands out to me is this image with a propeller looking hat. Perhaps it's nothing, but maybe it was what the warp zone pipes were originally intended to be, like Mario puts the hat on and flies to another area, or a super early version of the propeller power-up that was repurposed in New Super Mario Bros. Wii. You know, fun to think about. This art looks like it may have been the early concepts of how the fire flower would work. While Mario's color scheme is unchanged, it looks like he's shooting big bursts of yellow fire from his hands. Without a doubt, the most recognizable concept art from this game is Mario riding on an early version of Yoshi, who seemed to have a much more prehistoric / traditional dinosaur design. Miyamoto went on record saying he wanted Yoshi's idea to be implemented from the get-go, but because of the technical limitations of the NES, Yoshi had to wait until Super Mario World on the SNES to make his official debut. Mario also had a couple concept art sheets from pieces of media outside his video games, like the Japanese-only Super Mario Bros. Pichime Kyutsu Daisakusen. My last video went over that as well as other Mario cartoons in more detail, so go peep that if you haven't. We got some simple front and back arts for both Mario and Luigi. It feels like they wore their hats a lot higher here than they did in the final movie, but maybe I'm seeing things. As well as front, back, and side profiles of Mario from his Donkey Kong Saturday Supercade show. This art seems identical to what we got in the main show, just not colored in. For the 90s era, all of Mario's concept art came from the spin-off titles, funnily enough. Well, except for one. But this wasn't even one of his own games. Early concept art of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past shows Mario, Luigi, Peach, and a Goomba standing together with other mainstay Zelda characters. Perhaps this concept art played a part in other Mario characters having more notable appearances in Link's Awakening that released about a year later, but A Link to the Past did have a portrait of Mario in one of the houses though, so that's still pretty cool. Super Mario RPG's concept art is some of my personal favorites, as it has Mario donning a bunch of different outfits we've never really seen outside of this concept art. First off, this art of what's either a giant Mario riding a regular Yoshi or a regular Mario riding a mini Yoshi is hilarious. Then we got Mario in some medieval knight armor and two different shots of him dressed as a musketeer, just one of them more detailed than the other. Due to this game being developed by Square and it being the first of its kind for the Mario universe, I can see why the artists, specifically Jiro Mifune, if I'm not mistaken, were getting very experimental with Mario's attire. Maybe they believed he had to, wear a different outfit more fitting with a traditional RPG world as opposed to his standard plumbing clothing. Then again, maybe it was a good idea that kept him looking like regular Mario so, he'd be more recognizable for the time time period. As while Mario was big at that time, he wasn't nearly as big as he is now, where a game like Odyssey can work with all the different costumes. Super Mario RPG 2, which eventually became Paper Mario, got a couple concept art pieces as well. Both were done by Kazuyuki Kurashima, who worked on the first Super Mario RPG and had a hand in designing some of Scarlet and Violet's new Pokemon. The first piece shows Mario walking through the Mushroom Kingdom where Bowser and his baddies are waiting for him to cross their path. It also looks like chibi-fied versions of Link and Samus are there too. I highly doubt these guys were ever intended to actually appear as partners in the final game, but it's cool how they were even brought up in concept. The second piece is much more detailed, showing Mario in different environments wearing costumes that corresponded to said area. The music conductor outfit in particular would be used as a costume in Odyssey. Really wish we got to see the robot concept fully executed, but maybe one day.
Am I a joke to you?
The shadow form is the most intriguing for me though. It's got this strange combination of being cute and creepy at the same time. It looks like Mario might have had a pet dog at some point too. Once again, shout out to Odyssey for actually making that happen. For the 2000s era, one of two concept arts of Mario comes from Super Mario Strikers. These different pieces showed the different outfits the dev team experimented with over the course of the game's creation. One piece had Mario's jersey and shorts a lot looser / baggier than the final design. Peach is right next to him here, with her design being kinda close to her final. Previously, the shorts were black, not pink, and her top used to be a t-shirt jersey as opposed to a skin-tight spandex top. This piece is very close to Mario's final uniform, even with the streaks of fire on the shirt and the M emblem on the shorts in the same place, albeit the art style here wasn't nearly as gritty as the finals. Here we have Mario wearing a hoodie over his jersey and a standard sports cap underneath, with the final piece taking on the more gritty style, just with different uniforms. One with a jersey that has a more protruding collar, and another where Mario has a black helmet on, as well as a GameCube controller around his waist for whatever reason. The other two shots of the collar fit make him look like a hunchback too. It's pretty goofy. The second set of art is from Super Mario Galaxy, specifically various shots of Mario in the middle of doing his iconic Luma spin and flying through space, presumably through the launch stars. One sketch has him literally riding on top of a star though, while another on the bottom left looks like he might be wearing the wing cap from 64. Maybe the wing cap was being experimented with super early on, but got replaced with the red star power-up to give Galaxy more of a unique identity. Odyssey's concept art involving Mario specifically shows off a couple of his outfits, those being his wedding outfit and the sombrero poncho combo, both of which look essentially unchanged to their final versions. What is crazy is the fact that the concept of Mario capturing a mammoth in a snow area was being toyed around with at one point. Being able to capture the T-Rex is great as is, but if we got a second giant timed capture, a pure insanity would have ensued. As Super Mario 3D World gave us some early art of Cat Mario, which looks mostly unchanged, as well as what looks like early art for the game's box art, as the environments and poses certain characters are doing here look very similar to what we got in the end. Main differences being Luigi running on the ground instead of coming out of a pipe, Toad is in normal form, not cat form, the orange Sprixie is there, and Bowser sneaking under the floor instead of being off to the side like in the full art. I like how they randomly threw in a sketch of Mario carrying a piranha plant and overheating inside the cat suit too. It's not easy being that cute, it's really not. Similarly to Strikers, Mario Tennis Aces was the one other spin-off title to have concept art intended on showing off Mario only, those being various sketches of different poses he'd make playing in a tennis match. Most of Mario's concept art from 2020 onward is just from the Super Mario Bros. Movie, some of which seems like made it into the final movie, some didn't, and others got slightly tweaked, like Mario in the sewers working on pipes tirelessly, then enjoying a lunch break from McDonald's. I do love the idea of Mario hating mushrooms was thought of from the start and not some last minute gag thrown in. This art of Mario taking a phone call from a customer shows the truck he's driving said Luigi Bros on it instead of Mario Bros. Very curious as to why this was even considered in concept to begin with, since Mario Bros has always been the main name of the duo. Also got different face mock-ups for 7 different Mario emotions, with the final piece of concept art for Mario right now being from Mario Luigi Brothership. 2 pieces which show beaten up versions of both brothers, with one piece in particular showing Mario wearing a raincoat and rubber boots. Brothership's producer Akira Otani was experimenting with the idea of making Brothership a more serious and rugged adventure compared to previous Mario and Luigi games, on top of giving the bros designs more in line with the mainline titles as opposed to the unique designs originally made by Alpha Dream. But Nintendo wasn't really vibing with the concept, so they dialed it back and made the art style more in line with the previous game's official arts. Now, due to Luigi originally being a green reskin of Mario with not much of an identity of his own, not a whole lot of concept art existed for his character during the 80s era. Like, a lot of the time he just looked like Mario with like slightly different hair, but one thing that stayed consistent was he was green. Even the 90s was kind of dry, with the only true concept art of him coming from Mario RPG, donning his own version of the Musketeer outfit we saw Mario wearing earlier in the video. With the next one not being until Super Mario Maker 2, where we got to see concept art of what seemingly became the game's box art / main art with Builder Mario and Luigi in particular facing a little bit to the left instead of straight forward, only holding one brick block in his hands as opposed to multiple in both hands for the final art piece. It's actually so unfortunate no public concept art of Luigi's Mansion 1 or 2 exist. I would die to see the early concepts for both those, especially the first. 3 got some concept art that was mostly focused on the boss ghosts, but I'll count Luigi's art towards Luigi since they basically have the same model. This Luigi art shows him standing in front of a doorway with a scared expression, which is interesting because Luigi always had a, standard poker face with no real emotion in the final game. And maybe Next Level wanted to implement unique expressions for Luigi, but it was too hard to implement? No way to know for sure. Luigi's got his handful of concept art from the Mario movie as well. The character sheet for him has a lot more content than black and white facial expressions we got for Mario. Shots of him getting ready for the day, carrying books with coffee on top, and taking a nap on some mushrooms. That last shot, combined with the one of him swimming and the toad on his shoulder, leads me to believe that Luigi was supposed to be a lot more involved in Mario's eye-opening adventures in the Mushroom Kingdom, as opposed to being locked up in a cage for the majority of the final product. This is further backed up with this other piece showcasing Mario, Luigi, DK, Yoshi, and a toad fighting together against Bowser's minions. Granted, the following art of Bowser holding Luigi and Luigi trying to save Cranky from a cage also implies that the idea of Luigi getting captured was an idea since the early stages, and maybe Nintendo wanted to explore more ideas after Luigi was freed from Bowser's clutches that would have allowed him to get more done outside of the climax. But due to this being an Illumination movie mainly targeted towards a young audience, I can't imagine they would have wanted this movie going past the 90-minute mark, which probably would have needed to happen to fit extra Luigi content in. I'm sure Luigi will be a lot more involved in the sequel, assuming they don't take the exact same approach where rescuing Luigi is the main priority. Princess Peach definitely had more drastic changes to her design over the years compared to both Mario Bros. Concept art as well as the How to Win at Super Mario Bros. Guidebook depicted her in two very different ways. The black and white concept art, which seemed like an early version of the game's box art, showed Peach in a more traditional cartoon style, like she belonged in Popeye, which tracks since characters like Mario, Pauline, and DK took inspiration from the Popeye cartoons. Her eyes were simple black dots, braided hair, and she wore what looked like a bonnet instead of a tiara, or maybe it's a mushroom-shaped crown meant to fit her whole head. It's a bit hard to tell. While the guidebook technically isn't concept art, her design is so drastically different I wanted to mention it anyway. They depict her as a larger toad instead of a human, likely as a way to make her title as Princess of the Mushroom Kingdom fall more in line with her appearance. Peach also had a piece of 8-bit concept art showing how she would have looked facing forward instead of sideways like in the final game. That front-facing art did seem to get repurposed in the Lost Levels where her sprite was now facing forward when you rescue her. I mean, the late 80s, early 90s was a very weird time period for Peach because they also went through that period of like sometimes giving her brown hair and sometimes calling her Princess Toadstool. Like in-game, she could sometimes have brown hair, but in official art, she'd be blonde. But then they gave her brown hair in the Super Mario Bros. Super Show and Mario World cartoons, and they even called her Princess Toadstool in those cartoons, so they didn't really fully decide on what to call her and what to look like in every single piece of media until after Super Mario World, it seems. Jiro Mifune also drew Peach concept art during his time working on Mario RPG. Like Mario, she was given her own unique medieval-style armor, as well as a more formal gown with a fluffy hat on, and what appears to be a smaller version of her wearing a wizard outfit. Maybe the idea of Peach being a mage was being thrown around the table at one point. More concept art from Odyssey involving Peach shows the team was messing around with the idea of Mario being able to capture Peach, although I'm not too upset this wasn't included, as what would her unique purpose have been like other captures? Using her parasol or dress to float a bit? We already got Yoshi for the fluttering capabilities and then some, so I'm not really too bent out of shape about no Peach. The Mammoth, on the other hand, still kinda upset. Odyssey's second piece showed 3 different designs for Peach's yukata outfit she wears in the post-game whenever you visit Bowser's Kingdom. The far left outfit with the fire flower pattern was the only one used in the final version, whereas the cheap one and mushroom ones were never seen. I understand the other 2 accessories of the leaf and mushrooms not being in line with the vibe of Bowser's Kingdom, but I would have liked to see how a Goomba or, Bullet Bill headpiece would have looked. Naturally, Peach had a character concept sheet from the Mario movie as well, where it looked like she might have been planned to wear more casual attire you'd see someone wear at a gym at one point in the movie. Maybe this was what she was going to wear when training Mario at the obstacle course, but they changed it. This art of her ready to throw hands with DK is also adorable. It's interesting how Cranky was originally intended to be more in line with his video game self, just with a crown on. Early concept of the Rainbow Road section shows Peach wasn't going to wear a race helmet and would look more like how she does in Mario Kart 8. The other characters were all driving the same pipe frame carts too, but as we know, were given more unique cart designs in the final movie. Then there's this image of 2 different Peaches with the word beautiful on top of the sheet. It looks like they were experimenting with a more realistic humanoid Peach at one point, due to the change in her eyes, her crown being more detailed with its ridges, and some kind of pattern at the mid part of her dress instead of it being completely shaded pink. Bowser had 3 different designs going on during the first Super Mario Bros. Era. His original concept art shows a very simplistic version of what he eventually became, looking much more like an enlarged Koopa Troopa with some spikes, as opposed to now having a rounder head, horns, and spikes all over his shell. Despite his in-game model being mostly green and peach colored, his official art on the game's game's cover has his skin different shades of blue, yellow hair, and pure white spikes on his shell. Mario 3 was where Bowser's color scheme was, settled on for the most part, at least for in-game use, but there is art of him from Nintendo Power advertising the game where his eyebrows are black rather than orange, and he's wearing a purple cape. Capes don't really suit him in my opinion, so I'm kinda glad that never became permanent. Some of his craziest alternate designs come from the 1990 Super Mario Bros. Movie. Concept art for Bowser shows he was supposed to look a bit more in line with his game self, donning the orange hair, yellow horns, and shell, while still looking somewhat humanoid at the same time. Either way, it's still very uncanny like what we got in the final of the movie. The original plan was to have either Arnold Schwarzenegger or Michael Keaton play Bowser, but both of them turned the role down, so they eventually gave the part to Dennis Hopper. Even if they did have the technology to make Bowser look like this, it still probably wouldn't have looked very good. But this is what you get when you try to adapt a video game series filled with very cartoony elements into live action in the 90s. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to translate very well. Gotta mention Jiro the Hero one more time. His Mario RPG concept art of Bowser is quite intriguing. Not so much wearing armor here, but rather what I'd consider very formal or royal attire, fitting for a guy who has his own castle and army at his disposal. A more concept art of 3D World shows the early stages of Bowser using the double cherry power-up for his final fight, although he wasn't in cat form here, just in his base form. Bowser's remaining concept art from the Mario movie shows one piece of him laughing atop his castle with a two Kameks, or I guess Kamek and a regular Magic Koopa. Seriously, they either gotta give Kamek a new design or the Magic Koopa's a different default color palette at this point because, Jesus. He's got his own facial expression sheet like the other two guys previously mentioned, a gathering of his minions, presumably right before invading the Mushroom Kingdom. The two big things that stuck out here for me were the Boos, Thwomps, Toadies, and Boom Boom were originally considered as background baddies but never made the final cut. Boom Boom, I kind of understand. Maybe he's a bit too unique to appear as a first timer, but putting the other guys in, I can't imagine would have been that hard. A neat piece of Bowser sitting on his throne looking very confident, followed by an image of Mario on a bridge inside Bowser's castle ready to confront each other. Clearly meant to be a reference to how Mario dealt with Bowser in many of the 2D side-scroller games, so the idea of Mario going through Bowser's castle in depth as opposed to quickly crashing the wedding to save Luigi and Peach was being toyed with. The outside of Bowser's castle looked incredible in the final film, so it would have been interesting to see, these characters traveling through more specific areas in there. Maybe in a future film, knowing Bowser's refusal to permanently go away. And that brother is, William Afton before William Afton even existed. Yoshi, otherwise known as the best character in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, like mentioned previously, was intended to be in the Mario universe from the first titular game. I'll show the image again on screen for good measure. While no proper concept art for Yoshi exists related to Super Mario World's development, we do have early sprite work where he looks a lot skinnier than his final self. And weirdly enough, an unfinished model for Yoshi was found in the original Star Fox game assets. Some folks have speculated this model was used to propose the 3D Yoshi game that eventually became Croc, but I don't believe that's ever been officially confirmed. Like Bowser, Yoshi also had concept art drawn for the 1990 Mario movie, where his design looks pretty close to the final version, aka a super basic looking baby dinosaur. He did have the ridges on his back at one point though, and was directly inspired by how Godzilla looked, I guess. And by the way, Mario, I have to respectfully disagree.
I don't like that.
Back when the first Super Mario Galaxy was known as Super Mario Revolution during early development stages, concept showed Yoshi was planned from the get-go, as this art shows an image of Yoshi eating a pineapple, which looks very similar to this official art of Super Mario Sunshine. But as we know, he didn't become properly playable until Galaxy 2. Yoshi was part of what looked like the concept art from Mario Party 9's box art 2, which also included Birdo, Peach, Wario, and Bowser Jr. Although the poses / directions the characters are facing in the concept art are all different than the final version, Yoshi in particular looking ahead into the distance in concept, but directly at the star in the final box art. Some group concept art from Super Mario Maker threw Yoshi in there for good measure, like this one of a Toad rolling around a freshly hatched Yoshi baby. There's this one of him hiding behind some brick blocks while some Bowser baddies help Mario build, or this piece showing Yoshi eating fire directly from a fire spitter, then spitting it out to kill a Goomba. The art style from this concept reminds me of Yoshi's Story, at least when it comes to the overly round models and black dotted eyes, something that was common amongst Yoshi's Story bosses like Baby Bowser. Donkey Kong's just as old as Mario is, so like him, he's got some concept art that tracks back all the way to the 80s. Most notably, a smoothed out version of his 8-bit self from the arcade game. His nose looks a bit bigger in that sketch, and to me, looks like he might be in a sitting position, which is a position we don't really see him in throughout the main game, as he's always standing to throw barrels and such. Saturday Supercade had a sketch sheet for him too, only this has one model of him facing forward as opposed to Mario's 3. I love this blurb of Donkey Kong has thumb and 3 fingers. It's like he wrote it himself. Donkey Kong went through a lot of different looks looks during the development stages of the first Donkey Kong Country game. These first two sketches were designs from Nintendo and Miyamoto, which were more in line with how he looked in the official artwork for Donkey Kong on the Game Boy. This one in particular gave him a heart-shaped pattern on his tie as opposed to his initials. Kinda glad that didn't become the staple. I don't think it would have, meshed as well. Meanwhile, Rare was doing some mock-ups of their own, presumably wanting to make DK look more menacing than he did in previous titles. These shots were done by Rare employee James Reinman. As we can see, DK's brow is more furrowed compared to Nintendo sketches, making him look more like a real-life ape. They made his muscles more enhanced too, like his shoulders in particular being noticeably large. But jump scare. Got another sketch here where DK's head is noticeably larger and his chin was cleft as opposed to eventually being rounded. Here we have a mini evolution tree showing Miyamoto's suggestion, Rare's initial concept, and what we got in the end. Obviously, the final product is closest to what Rare initially wanted, just with the final DK being thinned out a bit and not as hunched forward. This art right here is super cursed though. This just looks like a DK balloon animal. Like if someone inflated a balloon-shaped DK, it would look like this. The 3D model based on this design at least looks a bit better, but I'm still glad that this was canned over the final design we actually got. For those who may be unaware, a canceled Donkey Kong racing game by Rare was planned for the GameCube at some point. While the game never released, concept art for the game exists. Specifically, these sketches of Diddy and Donkey riding on carts while Lanky Kong rides atop on Guard the Swordfish. I feel like a game like that had potential, considering Diddy Kong Racing is the 8th most sold N64 game at 4.8 million copies, and this seemed like it was serving as a sequel of sorts. DK's got his fair share of concept art from the Mario movie, and understandably so. Like this part of him breaking apart a tree, riding on a cart with Diddy whilst eating bananas, getting scolded by Cranky, and falling into water with Mario after Blue Shell breaks apart Rainbow Road. I like the idea of Diddy having a bit more of a role than he did in the final, which was a 2-second cameo, but I imagine there wasn't a whole lot of wiggle room. The movie's pacing was already incredibly fast as is, so having Diddy play more of a role would have meant the movie would have needed to be longer to not make the pacing feel worse, like I mentioned with Luigi earlier. Now his current Switch 2 design seems to be a mixture of Rare's design and what Miyamoto initially pitched to Rare / what he looks like in the Game Boy era. A lot of people are still very torn about this new DK. While the new one has grown on me a lot, I think I prefer it now over Rare's. It's still sad to see the Rare one not be represented in games, I imagine until further notice, but it's still being used at Universal DK theme park, so there's that. Wario, unfortunately, doesn't really have any public concept art from his Super Mario Land 2 period, which is a shame because the way his character was brought to the spotlight and stuck around for so long is still very fascinating to me. What I didn't expect was a Mario RPG Jiro Mifune sketch of Wario in a musketeer outfit. The fact that Wario, who at the time was still a pretty obscure name, was even being messed around with for the first Mario RPG is wild. And sadly, that's it. Nothing really out there for Wario at the moment. I'm hoping that changes in the future at some point, but we'll see. Rosalina became one of the most popular female Mario characters in such a quick period of time thanks to how impactful her character was in the first Galaxy game. The fact that she was given an actual backstory in a mainline title felt unheard of. At this point, still feels unheard of because no other character has gotten that, even a similar treatment since. Concept art of her shows her original hairstyle was in a beehive style with her dress closer to looking like Peaches, with the final concept art of her essentially being identical to what we have now, just darker shaded in her dress and hair areas. She was initially planned to be a relative of Peach, which still reflects in her current design. Strangely enough, Rosalina had concept art made during Super Mario Odyssey's development stages, where she's drawn in much more casual attire playing an acoustic guitar. It makes me wonder if Rosalina was initially supposed to be part of Pauline's band or just a unique NPC you could find in New Donk City. Considering the clothes she's wearing, I don't believe there's any indication the Comet Observatory is planned to be a kingdom. She would have, looked different and, been in her default attire. On the topic of Pauline, she got her fair share of concept art despite her roles in games being very sporadic over the years until the Switch era. Her concept sprite work from the DK arcade game is very interesting, as while she was depicted as blonde in almost all the promotional material, her color scheme here matches more with how she looks now, i.e. the brown hair, red dress combo. Her reference sheet for Saturday Supercade looks the most different compared to Mario and DK, at least to me, because her eyebrows are much more pronounced in the reference sheet compared to how she expressed herself in the main show. This art of her and Mario from Family Basic Manuals both make them look like completely different characters. Their noses and the wrinkles around their eyes make them look a lot older than they actually are. Fittingly, Pauline had her fair share of concept art from Mario Odyssey, as the game acted as her big return to the spotlight, in more ways than one. She was given an expression reference sheet for this game, where it seems like the only expression that wasn't used is the one of her singing a high note on the bottom right corner. Maybe some of the other ones weren't used either and I just don't remember, but I definitely would have remembered the high note expression if it was in. Another art sheet shows more poses of her from what looked like early stages of her New Donk Festival performance, as well as her dressed in more casual attire wearing jeans and sunglasses. Some of these shots were without her hat on, which she always had on her person in the final game. Considering hats were a central theme with Odyssey's character designs, I'm glad she kept it because it really suits her. With her final bit of concept art showing the early look of what her concert looks like at the New Donk Festival. As a bonus, here's early Shy Guy from Mario Strikers. I mean, he's just perfect, man. I don't know. Very few can compete with perfection. Totally not giving him an exception because he was on Shaft's top 10 most popular Mario characters. I'm more professional than that. So that pretty much covers it. It's pretty unfortunate other characters like Daisy and Waluigi don't have public concept art despite their high popularity. I mean, Daisy's sort of a weird one because she was sort of like a reskin for Peach for a while, so maybe that's why, but Waluigi, I don't know. Like I said earlier, perhaps there's still hope for the future. All it takes for is an employee to pull a Fumahide Aoki with Walu Peach and randomly drop some art if they feel confident enough in doing so. Huge thanks to both the Super Mario Bros. Wiki and the Cutting Room Floor site for compiling the majority of these art pieces in an organized manner. Helps out so much. And that day, Fumahide Aoki decides to shadow drop Waluigi concept art. I will be there.
And when you do, I'll be there.